Hello. My name is Daphne Blythe. And 1 week ago, my grandmother hugged me at a family dinner, then announced to a room full of relatives that I'd been receiving $8,000 a month for the past 4 years. I work 3 jobs. I eat dinner from discount bins. I have never seen a single cent. So yeah, that's where this starts. The porch hadn't changed. The same wraparound railing, the same creaking floorboards beneath my feet. Even the same brass lantern swayed just slightly in the early evening wind, casting long, forgiving shadows across the Kane family estate. But I had changed in ways none of them had bothered to see. I stood there longer than I meant to, my heels flat on the wood, my hands frozen at my sides. The dress I wore was practical, not polished. Neutral, not impressive. And I felt the weight of every pearl and linen-clad gaze brush across me like judgment disguised as courtesy. No one opened the door. I opened it myself. Inside, laughter danced off the chandeliers. The dining hall pulsed with warm lights and polished crystal, like someone had taken a photo of wealth and pressed unpause. There they were, cousins, uncles, Seraphine. Always Seraphine, glowing like she had her own lighting team. I stood in the threshold, invisible, until Henrietta's voice cut through. My darling girl. She approached with arms wide, lipstick too red, perfume too sweet. I hadn't expected the hug. I certainly hadn't expected what came after it. I hope you're enjoying the $8,000 monthly allowance. The room exhaled in amusement. Someone raised a glass. Seraphine giggled. A soft, contained thing. My grandmother beamed at me like she had just gifted me the world, and all I could do was blink. 8,000. Monthly. Allowance. There was a sound I made. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a cough. Something awkward and wrong that slipped out before I could cage it. My mouth moved, thank you, or maybe just oh, but my stomach had dropped straight through the floor. I felt every eye turn. I felt them catalog my shoes, my cheap earrings, the slight fray in my cardigan sleeve. $8,000? I'd been rationing coffee grounds to avoid buying a new bag before rent was due. 8,000? I hadn't seen 800 in a single deposit in years. I didn't say anything more. I smiled like a hostage does, tight-lipped and practiced, and found my seat at the far end of the table. The food looked expensive. I tasted none of it. After dinner, when the plates were cleared and the wine glasses clinked in conversations I wasn't invited into, I found him, my father, on the side veranda, facing the garden like he'd cultivated it himself. He didn't turn when I spoke. Where's the money? His shoulders stiffened for half a breath. Then he reached for his glass and took a sip like I hadn't spoken at all. Excuse me? The allowance, I said, voice quieter, tighter. That $8,000 a month. I've never seen it. Not once. He turned then, finally, and looked at me like I was asking about weather patterns, not fraud. I redirected it. The silence in my ears rang louder than the cicadas in the yard. To where? To someone who deserved it more. His words were airless. Sharp. Surgical. Seraphine needed a jump start. And she's built something with it, hasn't she? Retreats. Branding. Exposure. You? You're just working to survive. There was no malice in his voice. Just indifference. Like a man rearranging chess pieces, not children. My throat closed. My vision didn't blur, it sharpened. Every edge of the railing, every leaf trembling in the breeze. I clutched the wood behind me, grounding myself. I wasn't just left out, I whispered. I was erased. He didn't respond. He finished his wine. Then he walked past me like I wasn't standing there. Back in the guest room, I sat on the bed like a visitor in someone else's life. The sheets were crisp, the decor minimal, meant to impress, not comfort. I opened my banking app. Nothing. Still nothing. Then, just to be thorough, I opened my email. One message stood out, months old, marked, viewed. It was from the Kane Family Trust. I hadn't opened it. But it had been opened. Someone had my access. Someone had my name. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would. But there was something colder rising in me. Not rage. Not yet. But clarity. I lay back on the stiff pillow, watching the ceiling fan spin too fast above me. It made a low, repetitive sound, like a clock ticking toward a reckoning. Was I always meant to be the ghost in this house? Had they ever intended for me to inherit more than silence? My mother would have said, "Stay quiet. They'll see your worth." But she wasn't here. And they hadn't. So I lay there, listening to the echo of my own breath, the drum of my own pulse, and I made a decision. I didn't get angry that night. Not yet. But something in me stopped making excuses for them. I couldn't sleep. The laughter from downstairs had dissolved hours ago, replaced by the hollow tick of a clock somewhere down the hall. I stared at the ceiling, watching faint shadows move, until the silence grew heavy enough to force me out of bed. The air in the house was still perfumed with dinner and wine, the scent of lemon polish and old wood. I opened the door, and the hallway met me with that same careful brightness the family paid someone else to maintain. I walked slowly, barefoot. The wood was cold. Each step echoed in a house that no longer remembered my rhythm. Along the corridor hung the museum of our family, the wall of framed photos, polished weekly, placed in perfect symmetry. My fingers grazed the glass as I passed the oldest frames, my parents on their wedding day, my mother radiant, my father's first company opening, Seraphine in her high school cap, her smile wide enough to fill the frame. Then I stopped. The newest edition glowed under its own spotlight, Legacy Luncheon 2022. A gathering at the Savannah Country Club. Everyone was there, grandmother at the center, father proud beside her, uncles, cousins, even family friends who only appear for free champagne. Seraphine leaned against our grandmother's shoulder, a vision in cream silk. And me? Nowhere. I tried to remember where I had been that day. Working overtime, probably. Fixing someone else's accounts so I could make rent. No one had called. No one had sent a message. Not even a token, "Wish you could be here." It wasn't that they forgot. They knew. They just decided I wasn't the image they wanted to frame. The glass reflected my face beside theirs, distorted by light. For a second, I didn't recognize myself. I looked tired, older, like someone who'd spent too long pretending to belong. I reached up and touched the corner of the photo, and my own reflection blurred. Further down the hall, my old bedroom door was cracked open. Curiosity, or maybe masochism, pulled me forward. The doorknob was smooth, too polished, like someone else's fingerprints had lived there longer than mine. Inside, everything was white. The soft beige walls I'd once covered in poetry quotes had been repainted. A yoga mat lay rolled in the corner, a diffuser sat on the dresser, still glowing faint lavender light. Seraphine's initials, embroidered in gold, decorated a tote bag on the chair. My breath caught, a quiet sound swallowed by the newness of the space. The air smelled like eucalyptus and something sterile, as if memory had been disinfected out of the room. I crossed to the closet, opened it, and was met with emptiness. Not even a stray hanger. The drawers that once held letters from my mother were bare. I pulled open the last one, the one where I'd hidden her last birthday card to me, written in her soft, looping hand. Gone. Not even dust remained. Even the dust doesn't remember me. I sat on the edge of the bed, or rather, on the mat someone called a meditation bench now. My reflection in the wall mirror looked misplaced, an intruder in a hotel room she didn't book. My hands trembled, not from anger but from the sudden understanding that this space had been curated to erase me gently. I whispered into the room, half expecting it to answer, "When did I stop existing here?" The echo was soft, like pity. I remembered being 16. The night I won the state writing competition. I came home holding the plaque, my heart too full for words. My father sat in his recliner, reading the paper. I told him, voice shaking with excitement. He looked up for half a second, nodded, said, "That's nice, sweetheart," and went back to the headlines. 2 days later, Seraphine posted a dance video online. It went viral overnight. My father threw her a little celebration in the living room, balloons, cake, even champagne, for a toast. The same man who barely looked up for my achievement stood clapping, saying, "That's my girl. She's got the cane spark." I had clapped too, quietly, holding my plaque behind my back. My mother found me later that night. She sat beside me on the porch swing, her hand covering mine. "You don't need applause to be brilliant," she said softly. But even then, I knew applause meant you were seen. And being seen meant you mattered. That memory pressed against my ribs now, as I looked around the repurposed room. The walls whispered it back to me, I was never the story they wanted to tell. I stood, taking a deep breath, steady, deliberate. I needed proof of my own existence. Something tangible, undeniable. I pulled out my phone, the screen bright in the dim light, and opened the camera. I photographed the photo wall, the yoga mat, the diffuser, the tote bag. Then my empty closet, the blank drawers, the spotless floor. Each click felt like reclaiming a piece of me. In my Notes app, I created a new folder and typed, "Proof I exist." The words glowed against the black background like a tiny defiance. Inside, I dropped the photos, then a screenshot of my untouched bank statement, the email from the Kane Family Trust marked, "Viewed." If they wanted a narrative without me, I'd write one they couldn't delete. The hallway clock chimed once, startling me. I stepped back into the corridor and looked again at the photo wall. My family smiled forever under glass. I wondered what they'd do if I simply shattered it. If I let one clean crack run through their perfect legacy. I raised my hand halfway, then stopped. Not yet. The proof needed to live longer than my rage. Quietly, gently, I lowered my hand. When I turned back toward the guest room, a voice came from behind me. "Daphne?" It was my grandmother's. Soft, unsure. I hadn't heard her footsteps. I turned. "Yes?" She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a shawl, her lipstick faded. "You're still up? Couldn't sleep?" "I was just looking around," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, calm. Henrietta nodded slowly. "It's been a long day. Emotions run high in this family. You know how your father gets when he feels cornered." Cornered. That word stuck like a splinter. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Don't hold it against him, dear. He's done what he thought best for the family." "For the family," I repeated quietly. "Right." Her eyes flickered, guilt, maybe, or fatigue. "Try to rest. You'll feel better in the morning." She smiled, faintly. "You always do." But she was wrong. Morning didn't heal things like this. It just made them clearer. When she left, I lingered another moment before returning to the guest room. I placed my phone on the nightstand, the glow from the screen dimming slowly. I lay down, my heartbeat steadying, the sound of my grandmother's words still echoing faintly. Family. Legacy. Worth. They said those words like prayers, but they never included my name in them. I learned quietly, slowly, gently in ways they never imagined. Morning came without warmth. The light that crept through the curtains felt thin, cautious, as if even the sun knew this house wasn't meant for comfort anymore. I lay still for a while, pretending I didn't hear my phone buzz on the nightstand. But it didn't stop. A second buzz, then a third. I reached for it, half expecting some half-hearted apology from my father, or a message about breakfast downstairs. It wasn't either. The subject line on the email froze me where I sat, account activity notification, Kane Family Trust. My thumb hovered before I opened it. Inside, a record of a withdrawal, $15,000. The note said, authorized by D. Blythe. My name. My signature. The air thickened. I stared at the screen until my reflection stared back, pale and still. I whispered to no one, "I'm not on that account." My voice broke somewhere between disbelief and nausea. Then softer, almost afraid, "But I'm on the hook for it, aren't I?" Panic didn't come fast. It arrived quietly, the kind that hides behind reason. I checked my other accounts, my messages, every place money could move without my consent. Nothing. Still, I could feel it, that small, precise betrayal, cutting into whatever illusion of family had survived last night. I dressed quickly, pulled my hair into a knot, and left the guest room without looking back. Downstairs, the kitchen hummed with muted life. My father sat at the table reading the paper, coffee in hand, like nothing had happened. He didn't look up when I passed him. "Leaving so soon?" he asked. "I have work." He nodded once. "Drive safe." "And Daphne?" I stopped but didn't turn. "Don't overthink things. Money makes people see ghosts where there aren't any." I almost laughed. "Then I must live in a haunted house," I said, and walked out before he could reply. The drive out of Savannah felt endless. The fields blurred into soft gold, the kind that belongs to early summer and silence. I turned on the radio, old gospel, static between verses, and tried to focus on the road. But my father's words replayed themselves with cruel precision. Someone who deserved it more. Seraphine. It was always Seraphine. I passed the sign for the state line and pulled into a rest stop. The heat was already heavy, the air wet with the smell of pine. I rolled down the window, let the breeze sting my face. Then I opened my phone again, not to the bank, but to my Notes app. The folder I'd made last night, proof I exist, waited there. I renamed it the reclamation file. The new title glowed faintly, like a promise I hadn't known I'd made. If they want a narrative, I murmured, I'll write the one that survives them. When I reached my apartment, the first thing I noticed was the dust. The second was the chest in the corner, the one I'd kept since my mother's death, unopened, heavy with things I didn't want to remember. It had her initials carved on the brass plate. I sat before it, tracing the letters like they could still summon her voice. The lid creaked when I lifted it. Inside were papers, neatly stacked envelopes, the scent of lavender oil she always used. I went through them carefully, bills, photos, handwritten recipes, and then, near the bottom, a manila folder labeled Scholarship Application, 2008. My name was typed neatly across the top. My signature was at the bottom. I compared it to the digital signature on the trust email printout I'd received months ago. The same curl in the D. The same slope in the Y. Even the date formatting, identical. They didn't even need my consent, I whispered. Just my past. Grief has a sound. It's the faint snap of paper between your fingers when you realize someone used your dead mother's keepsakes to rob you. I sat there for a long time, breathing through the sting. Then I pulled out my printer, laid both documents side by side, and pressed copy. The hum of the machine felt like defiance. I highlighted the signatures, wrote in red pen, forgery suspected. Underneath, in smaller letters, family doesn't require consent when you're their property. By late afternoon, I had a stack of evidence, emails, printouts, bank screenshots. I placed them into a binder, labeled the spine legal. The word looked too official for my small apartment. But it steadied me. As night fell, I stood in my kitchen, the only light a dull flicker from the refrigerator. The hum filled the room like an old confession. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't dialed in years, Priya Maddox. She'd been my college roommate, now an attorney in Atlanta. She used to joke that I was the quiet one who noticed everything. I wondered if she'd still say that now. When she answered, her voice was warm, steady, a contrast to the tremor in mine. Daphne? It's been a long time. Yeah. I exhaled, staring at the documents spread across my counter. I need help. What kind? The legal kind. There was a pause, professional now. Tell me. I told her about the allowance, the forged signature, the rerouted funds. I spoke slowly, careful to keep my voice even, but by the time I finished, my throat ached. So, she said after a beat, you believe your father forged authorization to transfer trust funds intended for you? I don't just believe it. I have proof. Another pause. Then, quietly, I'll need everything. No delays. No pulling back. Something in her tone steadied me. I'm done pulling back. Good, she said. Email me everything tonight. We'll start from there. When the call ended, I leaned against the counter, the weight of it all pressing through me. My hands shook, not from fear this time but from something sharper, resolve. I looked around my apartment, the walls bare except for one framed photo of my mother. She was smiling, holding a cup of tea, sunlight in her hair. I remembered her saying once, strength isn't loud, Daphne. It's steady. It's knowing when to stop asking permission. I whispered it back to her, softly, I'm done asking. I gathered the papers into a folder and sealed it. The night outside hummed with crickets, the same song I'd heard through the veranda at the estate. It felt distant now, like another lifetime. Sitting there under the dull kitchen light, I realized something simple but enormous. I wasn't waiting for them to fix it anymore. The family that taught me silence was my inheritance had just handed me my first weapon, truth. I placed the binder on the table and watched the moonlight catch on the plastic cover. My reflection stared back at me, tired, fierce, unrecognizable from the woman who'd stood frozen at that dinner table. If they wanted a fight, I said quietly, gently, letting the words settle like a vow, they should have taught me how to lose. The week that followed moved slowly, like honey left out in the cold. I went to work, smiled when I needed to, paid bills, and answered small talk with the same numb politeness I had perfected for years. My binder sat on the table each night, a quiet witness to what was coming. When the text finally came through, it didn't surprise me. It simply confirmed what I already knew, they weren't done with me. It came from my father. Short, clipped, calculated. Family discussion. Let's be civil. No lawyers, please. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Civil, I whispered to myself. The Canes only call things civil when they're preparing to lie. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Priya with 2 words, "We're going." Her reply came fast. Wouldn't miss it. The following Friday, Savannah's air was thick with humidity and pretense. The Cane estate loomed like an accusation as Priya's car pulled up the gravel drive. I sat beside her in the passenger seat, clutching the binder in my lap. My palms were damp, but my voice stayed calm. "They think I'll come alone," I said quietly. Priya's eyes didn't leave the road. "Then they still don't know you." The house looked the same, but the feeling was different. The same wraparound porch, same manicured garden, same smell of money and mold under the paint. The front door opened before we even reached it. My father stood there, the perfect host. "Daphne," he said with a smile too polite to be real. "You look well." "I work," I replied, stepping past him. "It suits me." The dining room gleamed under a chandelier that had outlived better people. The long oak table was set for 8, though there were only 5 of us: father, Seraphine, grandmother Henrietta, Uncle Thomas, and me. The silverware sparkled, the candles burned low, and every seat carried the weight of performance. When Priya followed me in, conversation froze. "She really brought a lawyer to dinner?" Seraphine's voice carried a tone of disbelief wrapped in sugar. She looked immaculate, of course, cream dress, pearls, and that effortless entitlement she'd been raised to wear. My father's voice dropped, controlled. "This is not a courtroom, Daphne." Priya smiled pleasantly as she took her seat beside me. "Then you have nothing to worry about, Mr. Cane." The silence that followed was dense, alive. Henrietta cleared her throat, a sound that had quieted rooms for decades. "Let's not start with tension," she said softly. "We're family." I almost laughed. Instead, I reached for the folder and set it down gently in front of me. "Family," I said. "Right." Dinner began with roasted chicken, buttery potatoes, and small talk that tried too hard. Uncle Thomas asked about my work, Seraphine bragged about her retreat's new investor, Father spoke about restructuring assets like we were all shareholders in the same delusion. When the plates were cleared, my father folded his napkin carefully, the prelude to something unpleasant. "Daphne," he began, "we all feel this situation has gotten unnecessarily complicated. The family trust was meant to provide stability, not conflict. Let's discuss what you think you're owed, and maybe we can find a—" I interrupted, calm, almost gentle. "It's not what I think I'm owed. It's what was mine to begin with." He blinked, the way people do when they realize the script has changed. Seraphine leaned back, smiling slightly. "You always did have a flair for drama. Money comes and goes, Daphne. You can't let numbers define your worth." I turned my gaze to her, steady. "I don't. But you built your brand with mine." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me? You used my accounts. My name. My credit." I slid my phone across the table, screen lit with the family group chat. "And when you decided to erase me, you forgot that phones take screenshots." My father's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Priya leaned forward, her tone factual, unflinching. Proof that Daphne was deliberately excluded from all trust-related communications. Also, an ongoing pattern of identity misuse. The message thread was simple, brutal. "Don't loop Daphne in. She overreacts. She doesn't understand legacy." For a long moment, no one spoke. Henrietta's fork clattered softly against her plate. Uncle Thomas shifted in his chair. Seraphine broke the silence, voice low, falsely sweet. "She's not in the group? That must have been an accident." I met her gaze. Accidents don't repeat themselves for 4 years. Father's jaw tightened. "Enough," he said sharply. "You're twisting this into something ugly. It's family business, not fraud." Priya reached calmly into her bag and pulled out a clean envelope, placing it on the table. "Then this won't bother you." He frowned. "What is that?" She opened it slowly, deliberately. A formal notice of intent to pursue civil action for fraud, misrepresentation, and breach of fiduciary duty regarding Daphne Blythe's share of the Cane Trust. Henrietta gasped, her hand trembling as she set down her glass. Seraphine's fork slipped from her fingers and hit the plate with a sharp ring. My father's face hardened, every trace of charm gone. "You'll tear this family apart," he said quietly. I met his stare. You already did. I'm just taking the caution tape off. The words landed heavier than I expected. He didn't respond. The chandelier hummed faintly above us, the sound of electricity filling the silence where pretense used to live. Grandmother Henrietta spoke next, her voice brittle but composed. Dorian, she said to my father, is it true? Did you sign her name? He didn't answer. That was all the confirmation she needed. She pushed back her chair, her age showing suddenly in the small tremor of her hands. I asked you to protect this family's honor, she whispered. Not sell it. Seraphine reached for her arm, but Henrietta pulled away. The old matriarch's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something flicker there, shame, maybe, or regret. I stood then, gathering the binder, my phone, the envelope. I'm not staying for dessert, I said quietly. I've had enough sugar for one lifetime. No one stopped me as I walked toward the door. Priya followed, calm and steady. At the threshold, she glanced back once. Expect official contact within the week, she said evenly. Then she shut the door behind us. Outside, the air was thick with the smell of rain. The porch light flickered, just like it used to when the wiring was bad. I remembered fixing it once as a teenager, my father telling me, some things aren't worth the effort. He was wrong. In the car, I exhaled for the first time in hours. My hand shook slightly on my lap. Priya glanced over. You did well, she said. I didn't yell, I murmured. That's progress. She smiled. Quiet winds make the loudest noise. As we drove away, the estate disappeared behind the trees, swallowed by darkness. I felt both lighter and older. The truth had been spoken out loud, and it didn't destroy me. It simply rearranged the air I breathed. They wanted it private. But they made it personal. I let that thought settle softly, like the first calm after a storm. 2 days later, I was back in my apartment, the rain outside soft but relentless. The sound against the window was almost kind, steady, familiar, something I could trust. I stood in the kitchen with my chipped blue mug, the one that had survived every move and heartbreak, and poured coffee that tasted faintly of burnt hope. My laptop sat open on the counter, waiting for me to face whatever new mess carried my name. The bank finally finished syncing the trust account after weeks of emails and compliance verifications. I logged in slowly, the way people approach bad news they already sense is waiting. My breath caught on the number that shouldn't have been there, Serenity Spa, $1,800, authorized, D. Blythe. My thumb hovered over the transaction. I whispered into the quiet, I've never been there. The words sounded thin, like an excuse made to no one. But it was my name. My authorization. My debt. I scrolled down through the list, smaller charges repeating in neat intervals, each tied to the same card. Lunches, flower deliveries, digital ads. My name stamped neatly beside them all. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't theft. It was rebranding me, turned into someone else's credit line. I screenshotted everything, my fingers trembling just enough to blur one of the images. I resented and sent them all to Priya. Her reply came within minutes. Got them. We'll add this to evidence. Keep everything digital and physical. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and leaned on the counter. My reflection in the black coffee was barely visible, my features swallowed by the dark surface. For a moment, I wanted to believe it was just an error, a crossed wire, some automated mix-up. But I knew better. In this family, accidents had always been intentional. The screen on my phone lit up with a memory notification, one of those automatic pop-ups reminding you of something from a year ago today. It was a video from Seraphine's wellness retreat soft launch, all white dresses and rehearsed laughter. I hadn't thought about it in months. I pressed play. Seraphine stood in front of an audience, sunlight catching the diamond pendant around her neck. Her voice was soft, measured. This sanctuary exists because of the people who believed in me, especially my sister, Daphne, whose generosity and faith helped make this dream a reality. The crowd clapped. Someone shouted, "That's family," from the back. Seraphine smiled like a woman who had just invented the concept of love. I remember watching that video the first time, months ago, and feeling proud despite everything. I thought, at least she mentioned me. Now, the words hit different. I replayed the sentence. My sister, Daphne. She had used my name as decoration, as an alibi for money I'd never seen. Gratitude, scripted and rehearsed, sounded a lot like confession. The next email in my inbox proved it. An invoice, forwarded from the family accountant's address, billed to D. Blythe, carbon copied to Seraphine. Spa services. Photography sessions. Website upgrades. Everything neatly itemized and tied to the account I'd never touched. I was the cover story, I said to the empty kitchen. And they called it generosity. The memory pulled me backward, 2 weeks before the dinner, the last phone call with my father before everything unraveled. I had been sitting at the same counter, staring at my laptop, scrolling through new business filings that carried my name in tiny legal print. I'd called him then, voice already shaking. Why is my name on Seraphine's filings? He had sighed the way only a man certain of his authority could sigh. She needed it for credit. Your family. You wouldn't want her to fail, would you? Without my consent? He paused, maybe weighing whether truth or guilt would cost him more. You worry too much about paperwork. It's just administrative. We'll clean it up later. I remembered my hand tightening around the phone, the sound of my pulse in my ears. You used me, I said. He chuckled lightly. Don't be dramatic, Daphne. You've always been so rigid about rules. Try seeing the bigger picture. I wanted to scream then, but my voice came out low and tired. So I'm useful? But not deserving. Don't twist my words, he said sharply. You should be proud of your sister. She's doing something meaningful. You could learn from her. The line went quiet after that. Neither of us said goodbye. I had saved that call log, not because I needed proof but because I needed to remember what silence sounded like when it came from a parent. It was the sound of being erased while someone told you it was for your own good. Back in the present, I opened my laptop again and typed until my fingers hurt. I made a timeline, dates, amounts, transfers. Color-coded it, yellow for emotional erasure, red for financial evidence, green for legal grounds. My apartment looked like an investigation scene, but it was the only place I finally felt safe. The folder on my screen was growing fast, emails, scans, screenshots. I added one more tab, whistleblow, optional. Just seeing the word steadied me. I whispered to the empty room, softly, this isn't revenge. This is retrieval. Later that night, I poured another cup of coffee and sat surrounded by post-it notes covering the walls. Each note was a fragment of truth I had lived through but never named. I thought about how Seraphine's voice trembled just slightly during that launch video, how she said family like it was a product, not a promise. My anger wasn't loud. It was steady. I breathed through it gently, like my mother taught me, slow and deliberate. By midnight, I had a neat stack of files labeled, Kane Evidence. I looked at the binder, the one that had started this war, and added the new section. Then, almost without thinking, I whispered to the quiet air, you want statements? I'll give you receipts. I opened another document, this one personal. At the top, I wrote a single line, this is the story of how they mistook silence for permission. It wasn't a journal entry. It was a record, a living, breathing testimony. The rain had stopped. Outside, Savannah exhaled into the stillness of midnight. I stepped to the window, watching the city lights shimmer in small puddles along the street. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn blared, and a dog barked in protest. It was the sound of ordinary life, the kind I'd forgotten I could still have. My phone buzzed. A message from Priya. Good progress. The more you organize, the stronger the case. You're doing this right. I typed back, thanks. I just needed to see it all laid out. It feels less like pain when it's in order. Her reply came fast. That's how justice begins. I smiled quietly. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step, with each line I drew between their lies and my proof. I shut off the lights, leaving the room lit only by the glow of my monitor. On the screen, the words, whistleblow, optional, blinked softly like a heartbeat. For the first time, the silence in my apartment didn't feel empty. It felt powerful. They had called me rigid, dramatic, ungrateful. They had called me everything but right. And yet, here I was, building the truth piece by piece. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't crying. I was reclaiming. Quietly. Gently. Completely. I told them not to push. They thought I meant push back. The storm didn't start with thunder. It started with a toast. I watched it unfold from my laptop screen, propped on the kitchen table. The camera panned across a manicured rooftop patio, all soft pink lighting and curated smiles. Seraphine stood at the center, wrapped in white silk and intention, her hands raised gently like she was accepting a humanitarian award, not turning 36. Behind her, a neon sign glowed in cursive, "Empowered Women Empower Women." My fingers curled tighter around the edge of the table. The room smelled of stale coffee and resolve. Seraphine's voice echoed through my speakers. "I'm so grateful for the people who believed in me when no one else did," she said, eyes glassy, chin lifted. "My journey wasn't easy, but it was mine. And today, I stand on the foundation I built, with integrity, purpose, and love." I waited for it. The moment she'd say my name again. She didn't. Instead, as her followers spammed the comments with heart emojis, my phone buzzed with the notification I'd been expecting for 3 weeks. Subject: Civil complaint filed, Kane Family Trust. Timing wasn't just poetic. It was legal. I opened the document and read the first line slowly, letting it breathe. It began with my name, followed by 4 words that tasted like reclamation. Plaintiff, Daphne and Blythe. For the first time in this entire war, I felt the shift. Not imagined. Not wished for. Real. On paper. I took a screenshot of the stream still playing and forwarded it to Priya. Caption: "This is the moment she toasts to fraud." My hand didn't shake when I sent it. At Priya's office later that afternoon, the air was cool and clinical. The windows overlooked the Savannah skyline, but all I could focus on were the documents spread across her desk: names, dates, notarized statements. She slid a folder toward me with a sticky note on top that read, "Let this burn clean." Inside were the official inheritance filings for the Kane Family Trust. My eyes scanned quickly at first, then slowly, then not at all. I looked at Priya instead. "I'm not listed. Not even as secondary," she said gently. "You're not a beneficiary. You're not even a contingency." The room tilted slightly. I forced air through my nose, counted backward from 5. I folded my hands in my lap, firm, steady. "They didn't just remove me," I said softly. "They sealed the door behind them." Priya nodded. "That door's reopening now." I signed the authorization slowly, pressing the pen with a kind of reverence. Not for the page, but for every version of myself that had ever been told to stay quiet. Out of habit, I looked down at my watch. It was 5:14 p.m. At that exact moment, Seraphine was blowing out candles on a 3-tiered cake with her initials piped in gold. Back at home, I refreshed the live stream. The comments had shifted. Scattered between the birthday wishes were links to court documents. Questions. Wait. Is this about the lawsuit? Didn't her sister pay for that retreat? She built this? With whose money? I watched Seraphine blink hard. She glanced off camera, her posture stiffening. A woman in a black blazer leaned in, whispered something behind a champagne flute. Then the stream cut off. Abrupt. No goodbyes. No wrap-up. Just gone. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I simply exhaled. It wasn't just the lawsuit. It was the silence that followed. The vacuum left behind when a perfectly lit stage went dark, and people started wondering if they'd been applauding the wrong person all along. The phone rang just before midnight. No greeting. Just my father's voice, clipped and brittle. "You embarrassed her." My fingers paused over my keyboard. "You humiliated all of us." I didn't answer. He kept going. "I protected this family for decades. And now you." I cut in. "No. You didn't protect us. You protected the version of us that looked best on paper. Watch yourself, Daphne." The threat was quiet, but it rang loud. "You've made an enemy of this family." I pressed the phone closer to my ear and said, without flinching, "You did that when you forged my name." There was a long silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat there in the dim light of my living room, the only sound the ticking of the second-hand wall clock, and let the words settle around me like armor. Enemy of the family. What they never understood was that I didn't need to be loved by people who built their legacy on silence. I needed to be seen. Once. That was enough. The next morning, I went to the post office. A certified copy of the complaint, notarized and sealed, sat in a priority envelope addressed to the family's estate attorney. I handed it over, watched the clerk stamp it, and felt something release from my chest. On the walk home, a soft drizzle kissed the sidewalk. My shoes squeaked gently against the wet concrete, and the world felt oddly clean. As if truth had its own kind of weather. When I reached my building, I paused at the mailboxes. Nothing urgent. Just coupons, newsletters, a flyer for piano lessons. Normal life. It felt like a gift. Inside, I made tea, turned on an old Motown playlist, and started cleaning. Not aggressively. Not with the kind of fury that wants to erase. Just gently. Like a woman making room for something new. I wiped down the table, recycled old magazines, folded blankets I never used. Every small motion felt like choosing peace. Not because they had lost, but because I no longer needed to prove they had won. My inbox pinged. A message from Priya. Subject, next steps. Body, you're doing better than most clients. Stay steady. Let the paper do the talking. I replied, I will. Then I added one more line. They finally see me, not because I screamed, but because I stayed. I closed my laptop and stood at the window, sipping tea that had gone slightly cold. Outside, the drizzle had stopped. A bird landed on the fire escape, feathers puffed against the breeze. It looked around once, then flew off, quiet, sure, unhindered. If they thought I'd stop after making noise, they forgot I learned silence first. 10 days after the lawsuit, silence hung over everything. The kind of silence that felt earned, not empty. I thought the noise would come, angry phone calls, legal threats, statements spun to sound like love, but instead, there was nothing. Just a stillness that spread slowly, like morning fog. I'd learned long ago that quiet doesn't mean peace. It just means people are regrouping. At work, things had settled into a rhythm. I'd taken a few part-time shifts at a packaging center on the edge of town. The pay was steady, the hours predictable, and no one there knew my last name. That, in itself, felt like grace. I liked the smell of cardboard and tape, the small sounds of progress you could actually measure. It was during lunch break that everything shifted again. The break room was half full, the hum of vending machines competing with a tinny country song playing from someone's phone. I sat with a sandwich, scrolling through old emails when I heard a burst of laughter from across the room. Hey, Daphne, a coworker called, waving his phone. Isn't this your sister? My stomach tightened. He turned the screen toward me. A TikTok video played, the caption in bold, she said what? It was Seraphine, perfect lighting, perfect hair, perfect lie. The clip wasn't from her official channel. It was raw, shaky, filmed backstage during her retreat soft launch. Her voice was sharper than usual. Cut Daphne's name from the credits, she told her PR team. She didn't actually help, and I don't want questions. Someone off camera asked, but you mentioned her in the speech. Seraphine sighed, dramatic and bored. That was for optics. People love a redemption story. They think she's sweet, struggling, invisible. It makes me look generous. The video ended there. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. My coworker looked uncomfortable. Didn't know you were related, he muttered. Sorry, didn't mean to. It's fine, I said quietly, taking the phone for a closer look. My reflection flashed faintly across the glass. I watched her face freeze mid-sentence, her smile still intact. I wasn't a co-founder, I whispered. I was a cover story. The video spread fast. Within hours, sponsors began pulling their names from her website. Public relations statements followed, vague, panicked, too late. She had built her entire brand on authenticity, and now the mask had slipped, recorded in 4K. I didn't celebrate. I just sat at my station, taping boxes, my movements calm, deliberate. I'd spent years thinking silence was my weakness. Now I realized it was my weapon. That evening, I took one last delivery route before heading home. A rush order, marked urgent, address scribbled in black ink. When I scanned the label, my chest tightened. The destination, the Kane estate. I drove there slowly, the road familiar and foreign at the same time. The gates were open. The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had grown too large to fit inside it anymore. I parked, grabbed the parcel, and walked to the door. My hand hesitated just once before knocking. The door opened. Henrietta stood there, wrapped in a robe, her hair silver under the porch light. For a moment, she just stared. Then her eyes softened. "You're working here now?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said, voice steady. The box felt heavy, though it wasn't. She nodded slowly. "I see." We stood in silence for several seconds. The night hummed around us, crickets, wind through the oaks, the faint hum of her oxygen machine behind her. Finally, she asked, "Would you like to come in?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet." Her lips parted, but she didn't push. She took the package, nodded once more, and said, "You look more like your mother every day." "Thank you," I said softly. When I turned to leave, she whispered something, barely audible. "I never wanted it to go this way." "I know," I replied. "But it did." The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked back to the car. I didn't look back, and she didn't call after me. It wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. Quiet, reluctant recognition. The next few days unfolded like slow motion unraveling. Every social media feed, every news alert carried Seraphine's name. Fraud allegations. Sponsorship terminated. Silence from the Kane family. Online forums compared my quiet life to her empire. Someone posted side-by-side photos, hers in designer heels, mine in work boots. The caption read, "The real Kane is the one they buried." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Maybe both. My father must have felt the weight of it. He called Priya, not me. She forwarded me the transcript. "Dorian, this is out of control. Make her stop." "Priya, stop what?" "Telling the truth?" "Dorian, she's ruining the family's name." "Priya, no. Your daughter's using it correctly for the first time." Reading that exchange felt like inhaling clean air after years of dust. The next morning, I found an email waiting in my inbox. No subject line. Just, "I worked for your sister. You deserve to know this." I opened it cautiously. Inside were attachments, spreadsheets, scanned receipts, internal memos. Every one of them bore my name in places it didn't belong. There were transactions disguised as donations, fake reimbursements under D. Blythe, checks signed by assistants pretending to be me. The sender had written one line beneath it all. "I quit when I saw what she was doing. I just didn't know how to prove it." I sat back, staring at the screen. The hum of my refrigerator filled the silence. I didn't know this person, didn't know their reasons for breaking silence now. But I knew one thing, truth has a strange way of finding light. I printed everything, organizing it neatly into the growing binder of proof. My hand brushed against the old divider marked, "Whistleblow, optional." I crossed out the last word. It wasn't optional anymore. When I looked up, the sun had set, the room painted in blue shadow. I thought of Seraphine, once so certain that image could outrun integrity. I wondered what she was thinking now, staring at screens that no longer adored her. Then I thought of my grandmother, her voice soft at the door. "You look like your mother." The first honest thing she'd said to me in years. I closed the binder gently, the pages whispering like closure. For so long, I had been waiting to be invited back into their world. But standing here, surrounded by evidence and quiet certainty, I realized I didn't want their table anymore. Some storms don't need thunder to destroy foundations. Sometimes, truth whispered at the right time is enough to bring down walls. I poured myself a glass of water, sipped slowly, let it wash the dryness from my throat. For once, I didn't feel erased. I felt present, entirely, quietly, powerfully present. This time, I wouldn't knock on their door. I'd walk in through the one they left unlocked. It arrived on a Monday morning, wrapped in silence, tucked inside a padded envelope with no return address. I found it lodged in my mailbox, slanted and creased like it had been handled too many times before it reached me. The handwriting was unfamiliar, tight and slanted, but the paper inside told me everything I needed to know. I opened it slowly at the kitchen table, the hum of my old fridge keeping me company. A single document, folded once, its edges yellowed. It was on my mother's old letterhead, her name in soft cursive, the kind you don't see anymore. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I unfolded it and read the first line. "If anything happens to me, Daphne's share is to remain untouched." There was no flourish. No emotion. Just black ink and her signature at the bottom. Dated 6 months before her death. My fingers gripped the page like it might breathe. As if somewhere in the fibers, my mother's voice had been waiting for this moment to rise. I traced the loops in her handwriting slowly. Quietly. The way I'd once traced her fingers during long car rides when I was too small to know what I needed and too old to ask for it. That evening, I drove out to see Delora Finch. She still lived in the same one-bedroom cottage behind her niece's house. The path was lined with pots of marigolds and basil, the same way it had been when I was a child. Delora opened the door before I knocked. She had always known when someone was coming. She didn't say much at first, just stepped aside and nodded for me to come in. The house smelled of lemon balm and something old but comforting, like wool blankets that remember every winter. I handed her the document. She didn't flinch. I thought it was lost, I said. She sat in the armchair beside the window, motioned for me to sit across from her. Her eyes, still sharp, scanned the paper like it had been yesterday. Your mama asked me to mail 3 copies to her lawyer, Delora said. 2 for the office. 1 to be filed with the estate records. I did what she asked. Took them to the post office myself. What happened? I asked. She looked out the window, not avoiding, just choosing her words. Dorian found out. Said you didn't need to be burdened with all that. Said you'd waste it on. Well, he used words I won't repeat. I closed my eyes for a second. Then asked the question I had feared. He intercepted them? She nodded. The lawyer never saw them. I didn't press. Maybe I should have. He used her death to rewrite her last will, I whispered. Delora met my eyes then. He used your silence. But that's not who you are anymore. She stood slowly and disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she was holding a small folder, plastic sealed and taped shut. She handed it to me with both hands. This is the one I kept. Just in case. I took it gently. Thank you. No need for thanks, she said. Just make sure it sees daylight. The next morning, I walked into the Kane estate for what I knew would be the last time as a question. Priya met me in the driveway. She looked at me like a woman sizing up a storm and deciding it was survivable. You ready? She asked. I'm past ready. The study smelled the same. Leather-bound books, expensive oil diffusers, the faint scent of something burning too slowly to notice. Henrietta sat behind the desk. Dorian stood near the window, arms crossed. Seraphine leaned against the bookshelf, her phone tucked in her palm like a weapon she'd forgotten how to use. I handed the sealed folder to Henrietta. She opened it carefully. Inside was the original, untouched document from my mother. Her eyes scanned the lines. Her fingers traced the date. She didn't look at anyone for a long while. Then she turned to the other documents on the desk, the ones Seraphine had helped orchestrate, the trust changes, the beneficiary forms. She laid them side by side. I trusted you, Dorian, Henrietta said softly. With her wishes. With her daughter. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand. Not angrily. Just firmly. To Daphne, she said, her voice clearer now, we'll reassign the trustee. Permanently. The air shifted. Seraphine blinked slowly, like she hadn't prepared for silence instead of drama. Dorian said nothing. He stared at the floor, the muscles in his jaw tight, but he didn't argue. Henrietta turned her chair toward me, fully. Miss Daphne and Blythe, she said, not granddaughter, not dear, just my full name. And for once, it didn't feel cold. It felt correct. Priya slid a document toward me. Sign here, she said quietly. It transfers oversight back into your hands. No contest. I took the pen, breathed in slowly, and signed. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. Just for truth. For peace. Seraphine was the first to leave. She didn't say a word. Just turned and walked away, her heels echoing like punctuation. Dorian lingered, but said nothing. His legacy had finally gone silent. After they were gone, Henrietta looked at me for a long moment. He thought legacy was about money, she said. Your mother knew it was about memory. I nodded, unable to speak. Later, when we stepped outside, the sky was overcast but soft, the kind that threatens rain but never delivers. Henrietta paused beside me. You remind me of her, she said. Not in the way people mean it, she added. Not in looks. In weight. It took me a second to understand. You mean? In how she carried things? Yes, she said. You carry what others bury. Her voice was tired, but her eyes were clear. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the signed documents spread before me. The ink was still fresh. The coffee beside me was cold. But something in me was warm, quietly, gently, for the first time in years. I didn't win. I just made sure the lies didn't. 6 months passed quietly. Not the kind of quiet that aches, or hides, or waits. The kind that settles. The kind that teaches you how to breathe again without asking permission. On a Tuesday morning, I found myself standing in front of a small community center tucked between an old bakery and a dental office. The building smelled faintly of paint and paper, the kind of space that held more hope than history. A hand-lettered sign in the window read, "Free Workshop, Budgeting After a Break." Below it, my name, printed in plain font. No fanfare. No title. Inside, a dozen women sat around a scratched conference table. Some young, some older. All of them carrying something invisible in their shoulders, in the way they held their pens. I passed out folders and spoke softly, clearly, the way I'd taught myself to speak after years of being told I was too serious, too quiet, too much. "We're not here to fix the past," I began. "We're here to make the present manageable." A few nodded. One woman scribbled something in the margin of her worksheet. Another tapped her pen in rhythm with my words. I talked about income, expenses, prioritizing needs. I used phrases I wished someone had told me when I was 23 and terrified of overdrawing again. They didn't know what I'd survived. That was the beauty of rebuilding. It didn't need applause. The room clapped when I finished, not loudly. Just enough. It filled the space with something soft and steady. I gathered my things, thanked them for their time, and stepped into the elevator at the end of the hallway. She was already inside when the doors opened. Seraphine. Dressed in business casual, her hair pulled back, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes widened just slightly. The moment stretched. "You work here too?" she asked. I looked at the floor numbers, then at her. "I teach." She hesitated. "Reception," she said. No apology. No smile. The air between us was still. I shifted my bag on my shoulder. "The cleaning schedule's on the board," I said quietly. "If you need it." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. I didn't wait. When the doors opened, I stepped out without looking back. Some power doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it just walks away. That evening, I brewed tea slowly. There was no rush. The kitchen was warm, the window cracked open to let in the scent of honeysuckle and asphalt. On the counter sat a small wooden frame. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, Henrietta's handwriting, careful and deliberate. "If one day you feel erased, know that someone always saw you. And loved you for being quieter than the noise around you." I had read it dozens of times, but tonight, it held something new. Not weight. Lightness. I sat at the table, steam rising from my mug. My hands no longer shook. My name, once bent and borrowed, now rested where it belonged. It wasn't validation I needed. It was memory. And it was safe now. Outside, the garden waited. A small patch of soil behind the building, tucked between fences and alleys. I had started it in March, when the thaw came early. Just herbs and a few wildflowers at first. Now, it was something else entirely. Lavender, basil, snapdragons, and one stubborn tomato vine climbing toward the sun. I knelt in the dirt, fingers brushing away dead leaves. The soil was warm. The wind soft. There was no ceremony. No announcement. No press release. Just the quiet rhythm of tending to something that could grow again. A neighbor walked by, nodded. "You've got a good hand," she said. I smiled. Sometimes you just have to stay long enough for the roots to catch. When she was gone, I sat back on my heels and looked at what I'd made. Not just the garden. My life. I had spent so long trying to be included in their story. Now, I was writing my own. No footnotes. No corrections. Just the version that outlived them. Back inside, I closed the curtains and dimmed the lights. The apartment was still. Not empty. Just still. I made a note to myself, scribbled on a napkin, pinned near the sink, water the basil. Pay rent. Call no one. It made me laugh. Some stories don't end. They just stop needing to be retold. Sometimes, the loudest victories come without a sound. You don't need to scream to be heard, especially when the truth speaks louder than any apology that never came. What about you? Have you ever walked away from a table you were never truly welcome at? Tell me in the comments, I'm listening. And if this story found a quiet place in you, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories coming, some painful, some healing, all honest. I'll see you in the next one.